Joining us now are Ashley Connan. She is the director at the Eagleton Center for Public Interest at Rutgers. And on set on The Intrepid, we have our favoritist, Abby Livingston. She, of course, is with Puck News. And even though you are here with us, since Ashley did the polling, I think we're going to start off with her. Because, Ashley, looking at these different polls, we want to start with this recent NPR PBS Marist poll, which asked what we were just talking about, what Lisa was just talking to Tim about, which is how proud are you to be an American today? And it looks like the majority, 37%, say they are very proud. So what do you think is driving that, and what is shaping Americans' opinions of their country?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of headlines in the news right now about saying that patriotism has dropped and people aren't proud to be an American anymore. But really, the story here is in how the question is being asked by a variety of pollsters in this poll and in other ones. And so we really see that proud to be American number range anywhere from 33% in some polls to 70%. What's interesting is, you know, it depends on if you're asking about intensity. Intensity might be a little down, but we do in general see about half are supportive or proud to be an American. And in fact, this is a number that really hasn't changed since the bicentennial. The thing when we look under the hood, however, is that Republicans are much more positive, and we see that Democrats are much more negative within the past decade or so when it comes to the meaning of pride in America.
Abby, picking up on that, let's put this into a political context. So there is a kind of contested nature to pride in America at this moment, a political nature to it. I'd say, unfortunately here, but we're on the cusp of a speech that the governor of Maryland is going to deliver a little later this morning. We're going to speak with him before that speech. It's going to focus on the notion of patriotism being a universally held thing. As you look ahead to the midterms and the general election after that, how are politicians processing, yes, this moment, this anniversary, but this notion of Americanism? I even think back on what the president said last night in that speech that was delayed because of weather, talking about communism and the specter of communism looming large here. It is a moment when Americanism is kind of being scrutinized and talked about by both parties here.
What I find so fascinating about this, and I've read a lot about the bicentennial, I wasn't here for that one, and the Hudson behind us was filled with ships, and this was a highly coordinated multi-city thing coming from the White House, and this is much more bottom up. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I am most interested in this summer, I mean, first of all, I just flew in from Texas, and it's the same vibe in Texas that it is in New York City, where it's kind of like Christmas. Like, you think, I'm not going to get into it this year, and the bunting is out, the patriotism's coming out. I think everyone knows this is special.
Flags are flying, yes.
But I also just wonder, what impact did the World Cup have on this? And it has been just such a moment where we've had outsiders reflect back to us what a great country this is and how many resources we have and how kind individual people are despite our national political turmoil. And so I just think it's an interesting moment in time.
We see the Robert McAllister passing by here. I just want to point out, I think we have a shot of that ship coming into a port here right next to us. They're starting to move,
I think
Christina.
Your vision is much better than mine.
I'm seizing on these names as I can, knowing that when they really start coming by, I'm going to have no ability to identify any of these
David's
ships.
going to absolutely beat me in this ship knowledge today. But actually, I do have some more polling knowledge that I can lay on you. We heard very optimistic messages from Abby there, and I do think there's something to that. It has been lovely to watch the World Cup tourists come in and, as you said, reflect a kind and generous and kind of zany image of America with our giant sodas back to us. But there are other polls, there are other questions in this poll, and one of them is, do you think America's best days are behind us? The majority said they're ahead of us, but it's a pretty close split. 45% of the country is saying, do you think America's best days are behind us? They're saying yes. What do you do with that? And if you are a public official, how do you use that? Do you try to change people's minds, or is it easier to get elected if you kind of lean into that?
What's hard here is Democrats and Republicans agree that there is a problem, and they don't agree, though, on the solution. And so we see that come through in polling like this, where, Republicans and Democrats alike, the gap is small when it comes to them thinking that America's best days are behind us, but it's for different reasons. And so it becomes very hard for a politician where to kind of go with that. Are they going to stoke the fire and kind of lean into that anger, or are they going to try to find a solution? But those solutions are not necessarily going to be palatable by partisans of all stripes. So I think that's a real challenge and a real question as we head into the midterms, especially with Americans showing kind of such a malaise when it comes to so many components of our democracy and the future outlook of it as well.
On that note, let me pull up something here for you, Abby. This is a Marquette Law School study from recent days, asked about trust in government. And this is over a pretty broad historical stretch going back to 1958 when it was 73% of Americans had trust in government. We've seen a decline ever since to 18%
18%
today.
from 73.
I mean, that's a sobering diminution in trust. But, I mean, what is a politician to do with that number? We talk a lot about faith in institutions. Yes, in Congress. Yes, in government broadly, journalism and the like. How do politicians think about rebuilding from that?
I think they have to be worthy of respect. And I think, when you go back, 20, 30 years, there wasn't as much scrutiny on these individual politicians. We know so much more about them than we ever did before the internet. But at the same time, a lot of them don't live up to the status of their job, and they are in it for themselves, and the American public is seeing every step of it. And so I think a lot more self-awareness would go a long way.
Actually, the other thing that we've been talking a lot about is capitalism, communism, as the president mentioned in his speech last night, and socialism, because you have these self-identified democratic socialists making gains in New York and now Colorado. And I'm from Colorado. I went on the bastion of connecting with people you went to high school with, Facebook, and asked a bunch of people, Facebook.com on the interwebs. And I said to them, if you are someone who doesn't vote by party name, which a lot of Coloradans don't, there is a lot of independents, would you vote for someone who self-identified as a democratic socialist? And a lot of people immediately said no. Some didn't. Some said it was actually a bonus point in their favor. But we have this question, how do you feel about capitalism? 44% positive from this NBC News poll, 28% negative. In one of the most capitalist countries in the world, that seems significant to me. And I'm wondering what your take is on that, especially given these gains of some of these more far-left candidates in the recent midterms.
Yeah, there's an interesting story here, and there's been a number of polls about capitalism recently, and I would say when they're pitted against each other, and even when they're not, we do see that anywhere from almost half to just over half support capitalism, and we see maybe anywhere from around a third to just under 4 in 10 support socialism. But I think that socialism is really a proxy for the wants and the desires of some voters who want to see more affordability, who want to see universal health care, who want to see prices go down, or are concerned about the economy, not necessarily the true definition of socialism. And we particularly see that desire or the support of socialism, favorability of it, rise among Democrats and rise among Gen Z voters. What we need to be, or what the Democratic Party, frankly, needs to be aware of going into the midterms is there is going to be that challenge. And where will a lot of these progressive or Democratic socialist candidates that are winning in primaries or special elections, will they also make it through the general in November? And I think that's the big question here. And kind of what does socialism mean to Americans when they're saying they're in support of it? Is it more in support of just simply affordability, or is it more in sort of the actual political movement?
Abby Livingston, let me get your read on that as well. I mean, I think this is a hot button thing, sees on the name itself, on the socialism name. But to Christina's point, I think obviously in some corners of Denver, here in New York City, there's a resonance to that message that Ashley was just talking about a moment ago. What do Democrats broadly take away from what we've seen over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I think with the socialism label, the DSA candidates are the ones who are more inclined to challenge the status quo. I think in the next...
Unabashedly.
I think next term we're going to start seeing the politicians who've been waiting in line to run for Congress or the Senate, who have been waiting for the incumbent to retire like good little politicians do, are going to look around and say, if I don't run now, I'm going to miss my chance. And so the big question of the DSA socialist argument is this just a really blue district thing? And do they go to Congress and advocate, or does this spill over and affect other Democrats in safer districts? And we just don't know the answer to that.
It's going to be really interesting to see, and you can see Republicans who seem to be on the back foot, at least with messaging going into the fall, now have something that they're seizing on quite quickly.
Can I ask you just very quickly to come full circle? You talked about sort of what happened here in the bicentennial, and we haven't talked about how there are kind of two organizations under which all of these celebrations are happening. America 250, this kind of bipartisan effort, and then there's Freedom 250, which is President Trump's. As you watch what unfolds here today, how are you thinking about the way that split has happened in light of what you mentioned? We have about 30 seconds, I'm sorry to say.
I just think it is, I think Donald Trump tried to co-opt this, starting with his birthday and the UFC fight, and I think between the World Cup and everything else, he hasn't. And so this is, I just am fascinated with how this is becoming a bottom-up celebration, not from the top down.